What's the biggest waste of money you've ever seen people spend on? Story 1. A guy I knew was in a long-distance relationship with a girl he hadn't met in person yet. One day, she tells him she's going to fly out to meet him in a month. At the time, he was living in his parents' basement, something he hadn't exactly shared during their conversations. In a panic, he rushed to get a new apartment. But that wasn't all. He went to a furniture rental store and rented an entire apartment's worth of furniture. Couch, dining set, bedroom suite, TV, the works. If you're not aware, renting furniture can get incredibly expensive very quickly. So after spending all this money, the day finally came and the girl arrived. They went to his newly furnished apartment and that's when she dropped the bombshell. She wanted to break up. She explained that she didn't want to do it over text and felt she owed him the courtesy of meeting him in person at least once. She stayed one night, sleeping in the rental bed while he crashed on the rental couch. The next day, he drove her to the airport in his rental car. Apparently, her stop in our city was just an extended layover on her way to Europe to tour with friends. I can't even imagine how much he spent on that one breakup date, but man, what a waste. Story 2. One of my friends once got about $50K from his dad and decided to blow most of it in one night at Myrtle Beach, hopping from strip club to strip club in a desperate attempt to get laid. The whole thing was a train wreck, not just because of where he chose to go, but because of all the so-called friends he had around him who didn't seem to mind taking wads of hundreds from him without trying to talk any sense into him. At some point I walked up to him and tried to intervene. Dude, it's 4 a.m. You've got maybe 15K left. Please, just go home. You don't need to be doing this. I pleaded, but he wouldn't listen. Instead, he doubled down, buying a pound of weed, a bunch of coke, and some e-pills, going on another 2-day bender. It was all gone, every last cent. And when the money ran dry, so did the loyalty of those friends. Suddenly, they all had plans every time he tried to hit them up. To make the situation even more pathetic, he did end up getting laid that night, but things didn't go as planned for him and he didn't finish. In his drunken, high stupor, he actually called the girl up a couple of hours later, demanding his money back, or insisting she come back to finish the job. Unsurprisingly, she never came back. Story 3. When I was little, my uncle passed away due to a mistake made by the hospital. My aunt sued them and won a substantial amount of money, practically a fortune. Instead of being cautious, she went on a massive spending spree. She bought a mansion, got a whole fleet of four-wheelers, motorcycles, and a new car and truck. Then she went all out on an in-ground pool complete with a massive water slide. She even went as far as buying Apple computers for every room in the house, including the kitchen. On top of all that, she purchased a photography studio stocked with tens of thousands of dollars worth of top-of-the-line equipment. It was like she transformed overnight from someone who was just renting an apartment to living the life of a celebrity. As a kid, visiting her house was like stepping into a dream world, but within about 2 years, the money was all gone. She ended up losing everything and was back to renting an apartment in a not-so-great part of town, right back where she had started. Story 4. A friend of mine back in the day inherited around 50K from his dad. He ended up blowing most of it in a single night at Myrtle Beach, spending it all at strip clubs in an attempt to get laid. What really disgusted me wasn't just the places he went, but the way his so-called friends were happy to take handfuls of hundreds from him without even trying to knock some sense into him. At one point, I pulled him aside and said, "Dude, it's 4 a.m. You've only got about 15K left. Please, just go home. You don't need to be doing this." But he wasn't having any of it. Instead, he went and bought a pound of weed, a bunch of coke, some e-pills, and went on another 2-day bender. By the end of it, all the money was gone. As soon as the cash dried up, all those friends suddenly had plans every time he tried to hit them up. The saddest part of it all was that he did end up getting laid that night, but apparently it didn't go well because he called the girl back 2 hours later asking for a refund or for her to come back and finish the job. Needless to say, she never came back. Story 5. I've spent roughly $9,000 on mobile gaming over the years, and just thinking about it now makes my stomach turn. It all starts innocently enough. You tell yourself, oh, this banner ends tonight, and I have better odds of getting something I want if I do a 10 spin. I can't grind for currency and time and only need to spend $2 to get what I need. And then the worst thing that can happen happens. You get lucky. You get what you want. That moment of success rewires your brain, making it feel okay to spend money on these games. Even when you fail the next time, you remember that sweet victory, so you start spending more. After a while, you start rationalizing bigger purchases. I can pay $3 for $5 meta currency, or if I spend $80, I can max out for 210 meta currency. If I'm spending money already, I might as well get the most bang for my buck. You spend more and more time playing, and it justifies the spending. Why not drop $80 every month? I don't play other games anymore, so I'll just support this one. Then 2 banners pop up in the same month. I can afford another purchase this month. Eventually, someone you really like appears in a banner, and you have bad luck. You can't stop pulling, caught up in the momentum. Suddenly, $200 is gone, or $300, or even $800. At that point, you're in too deep. Money starts losing its value. You've already messed up so much, why not keep going? If you're lucky, like I was, you eventually snap out of it. But getting to that point takes a lot, and looking back, it's a hard pill to swallow. Story 6. I worked the night shift at a gas station convenience store, and there was this guy who'd come in every single day like clockwork. He'd get gas, buy a pack of cigarettes, and grab a scratcher. Sometimes he'd also buy a lotto ticket. I did the math once. He was spending about $500 a month just on gambling in that store alone. One Monday morning, he walked in looking rough, so I asked him what was up. He told me he had a bad weekend and maxed out a $5K credit card gambling in Vegas. He seemed totally unfazed though, because right after telling me this, he went on to buy his usual scratcher and lotto ticket. He said he needed the money to pay off that credit card debt he just racked up. I used to stand there during my shifts looking at the odds printed in the fine print on those scratchers and lotto tickets. It's wild how slim the chances are of actually winning anything significant. Seeing this guy come in day after day, it really drove home how much of a disease gambling can be. Story 7. A friend of mine got really into these digital art pieces, NFTs. He was all about buying these pixelated pictures of animals wearing different hats or holding objects, and he kept telling us how these were going to be worth a fortune someday. He even convinced another buddy to jump in and start buying some of these digital masterpieces. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. They were spending hundreds of dollars on what was essentially a small pixelated image that anyone could right-click and save. But they were all in, so one of them ends up getting this really rare digital artwork, a pixelated cat wearing a top hat and monocle of all things. He puts it up for sale as a joke at $88.80. We laughed about it, thinking no one would actually buy it. But then, someone did. He actually made $88 from this tiny pixelated image of a cat. I couldn't believe it. It was this strange mix of emotions. Disbelief, anger, amazement, and a tinge of jealousy. I mean, who wouldn't want to make a few grand off something so ridiculous? Story 8. My friend once got hooked on this high-end food delivery service that specialized in ultra gourmet meals. We're talking dishes that looked like they belonged in a Michelin-starred restaurant, all delivered to your doorstep. He was convinced that this was the peak of dining at home and started ordering almost every day. Each meal cost around $100, and they were these tiny portions that you could finish in 3 bites. He kept saying how it was an experience and that you couldn't put a price on quality. He convinced another friend to try it out, and soon they were both spending hundreds of dollars a week on these meals. They even got into this competition over who could order the most exotic dishes. One week, he ordered a truffle-infused lobster tail with gold leaf garnish. Another time, it was Wagyu beef sliders with a side of saffron aioli. The craziest part, he even paid extra for these artisanal sauces that came in tiny glass bottles, claiming they were worth every penny. One day, they put their orders on social media, just to show off. Someone actually messaged him asking if he was willing to sell one of his meals. He jokingly put a crazy price on it, something like $300 for a single meal. To everyone's shock, someone bought it. He made $300 off a meal that probably cost a third of that. I couldn't believe it. There I was, eating my homemade sandwich, while he just made a profit on some overpriced takeout. I felt so many things: amusement, disbelief, even a little jealousy. Who knew food could turn into an investment?